The session would go on for 1 hour max, and the purpose of this is fundamentally giving you a trajectory of what's your preparation for anthropology, right? Because offline, online, I would see two kinds of participants here. One, those who are aiming for 2025. In the sense, I don't know how many of you are updated with the news that the result is somewhere towards this weekend of the prelims examination is what is the latest update. So it's a good news that it's going to be early, right? Otherwise it was anticipated somewhere on 9th or 10th of this particular month. Now those who are aiming for 2025 and others is those who are aiming for 2026. Now that means somebody who could not make it in 2025 and somebody who has taken a break in 2025 and directly aiming for 2026. Now for both of them, I have a variant which has been brought in with respect to anthropology and coverage of the syllabus. Now for these candidates, we have something called as strategic revision for mains. And for these candidates, we have something called as mission mains. Now, among both of this, one thing is common. The common element that you are going to have is the revision classes. And as I progress, once I discuss upon what is going to be part of these revision classes, I would also tell you what is going to be the difference with respect to strategic revision for mains and mission mains. The similarity is the revision classes. Now in this particular revision classes, when I say, now again I am making it a very clear disclaimer here that it is not complete anthropology that I am going to teach you. Because teaching you complete anthropology doesn't make sense, one. And teaching you complete anthropology is not possible in the shortest period that we have. Because these revision sessions, one major aspect is these are going to be oriented only on important themes of the syllabus. Now when I say important themes of the syllabus, it's very clear that when I look at paper 1, I can never see a question paper without 1.5 and 1.6. That is from the side of primatology and from the side of the basic aspects of your fossils, basic archaeology that I see. Definitely one question from 1.5, 1.6. I can never see a question paper without lithic cultures of 1.8. And more often than not in this, when you observe, we see Mesolithic cultures is highly repeated every year, either in paper 1 or paper 2 we would have Mesolithic. So 1.8 is one more definite area where I see. Alternatingly, I see a question coming from either 2.1 or 2.2, that is culture and society. If 1 year I am getting 2.1, 1 year I am going to get 2.2. Right? In that particular aspect, I would emphasize on what is going to be the cyclical approach which UPSC is going to follow in questioning. And once I see that, again I would have similar pattern of 2.3 and 2.4. 1 year if I get a question on marriage, 1 year I have a question on family. But 2020 was very specific here, where they have combined both of these elements of marriage and family into one question. So that could be one dimension, because generally we study impact of urbanization and industrialization on family. But it asked even marriage. In that context, what you are supposed to do, you would have to understand the dynamics of marriage. For example, live-in relationship is one such dynamic. Or with respect to the changing nature of marriage payments is one more dynamic that you will have to see. So those dynamics have to be integrated. So alternatingly, we have 2.3 or 2.4. Definite question from 2.5. Kinship, we have one question. Either a 10 marker. If they want to go little overboard also, they would go for the kinship terminologies. If they are not going for kinship terminologies, then they would go for theories. That is your alliance theory and descent theory. That could be one area. Now once that is done here, again I see a cyclical approach with respect to 3 and 4. Either of it is asked. Right? In third chapter, that is your economic, if they are asking something, fourth chapter they might skip. In fourth chapter, if they are asking something, third chapter they might skip. That is one observation again you make. That means this is alternating, this is alternating, this is alternating. And again when you look at fifth chapter, I can never imagine a question paper without religion. And especially one of the hotspots in that particular area is approaches to religion. But one beauty of these approaches to religion is, so far whatever they have asked from those 3 approaches: evolutionary, right, functional and psychological approach. But suddenly in 2023 they brought in the Gede's perspective on religion. That is the symbolic approach towards religion and the interpretative approach towards religion, and using of Gilbert Ryle's understanding of thick description in religion. So that means that's a variant. So in that context, so fifth chapter is one hotspot. Definitely again sixth. Now in sixth chapter, what you should understand, in sixth chapter is everything important? No. What you have to understand is there are 3-4 theories which are constantly repeated. Ab usme one theory that is constantly repeated is symbolic and interpretative. Very important. One more area which is definitely important is historical particularism. Another area which is extremely important in this particular chapter is they could go for cultural materialism, right? And in case if they are going to skip these, then the next priority would come to CPS, because historical particularism and cultural materialism is more of a 10 marker. This is more of a 15 marker. Sometimes in 2020 we had a 20 marker coming from CPS, Culture Personality School. That's a 20 marker. And CPS is one area which is important. If they are skipping any of those, they are going for CPS. In case if they are skipping all of this, then the next priority they have is neo-evolutionism. Neo-evolutionism is another area where they are categorically asking. And sometimes they are going for neo-evolutionism as a broad topic, or sometimes they could go for Julian H. Stewart, Leslie Alvin White in the context of culturology as a phenomenon. That could be one dimension. In case if they skip this also, then we have functionalism and structuralism. That's one area, right? And suddenly when UPSC wants to get exotic in anthropology, then they would go for postmodernism. Because postmodernist ka approach hi वैसा है. It's extremely different. It's an extreme ideology that I see where everything they say, it is all bogus. So in that context, what happens is sometimes, very rare, last year we had postmodernism. Usse pehle, I think somewhere in 2018 or something like that, we had postmodernism, or 2020 we had postmodernism. So it's a very, very rare phenomena where they go for postmodernism. Again we have one definite question coming from 7th chapter and 8th chapter. When I say 7th chapter, most of us learn about language, fantastic. Most of us learn about social context of language, beautiful. But the problem with UPSC is we always see UPSC tries to interlink culture and language to a larger extent. It looks at an interplay of cultural determinism with linguistic determinism. It is looking at that. Now when you look at the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, that's more of a linguistic determinism. When you look at double speak, or when you look at William Bryson's understanding there. So all of these are what? It is seen in the context of cultural determinism versus linguistic determinism in the context of 7th chapter, and students are little confused there. But it is nothing but culture determining language, language determining culture. That's it. If you understand this interplay, you are able to write any analytical question from that section. 8th chapter, we always have one method which is being asked. And very favorite area of this is what? Participant observation. If they are missing that, evaluation of field work. If both of these are missed, then one method they would ask either case study or either secondary sources, something, and every year we have a question from 8th chapter. Now why am I telling you all of this? My approach when I am going to talk about revision classes will only be emphasized on these areas which are high yielding in nature. That is why I named it as what? Strategic. It is not complete. Why? It is my imperative that I will have to hit the bullseye. I don't want to throw arrows outside the arena which is going to miss my target. Now that means what? Don't you think within minimal time, what are we going to do? We are going to maximize our outcome. Now this is the first part of paper 1. If I see paper 2 also in the second part of paper 1 as well, I would never see a question paper without 9.4. Chromosomal abnormalities. I always have a question from 9.4 chromosomal abnormalities at any cost. And here, as I told you, either it is a question from 9.1, 9.2 or 9.3, any of these. It's not all. Any of these I would have one question coming from 9.1 or 9.2 or 9.3, one of these areas. Sometimes Mendel, sometimes the genetic impacts of consanguinal and non-consanguinal, sometimes the aspects of selection, inbreeding, sometimes the evolutionary forces, Faulkner's theories of evolutionary forces, where we discuss about the systemic theory and the dispersive theories. So that could be one. Apart from that, surprisingly, they don't skip 9.5. Most of us don't give much of the importance to 9.5, race and racism. We only study race is a biological concept, race is a sociological concept. We study theories of race. Fantastic. But every year we have one question. For example, you see race versus ethnicity. In 2023, the T.H. Erickson's understanding of race versus ethnicity was a concept there. So in that context, 9.5 is mandatory, either a 10 marker or a 15 marker. Again, 9.7 is one area which is mandatory. Ecological anthropology. Because in that, they would only ask you, either it is with respect to high altitude as one standalone question. If they are missing that, then they would go for hot and cold climates in combination. There are very, very rare instances where they have gone for talking about ecological anthropology as a broad concept. But otherwise, it's very, very specific with respect to the changes. Because one kind of different question that was asked was in 2018. They asked about acclimatization, adaptation, adaptability. What is the understanding? What is the difference? And they asked you to explain all these three with the respective example. Now that is one different question that was asked, but otherwise more or less it is same. Now apart from this, another area where I always have a question is 10th chapter, growth and development. And one favorite area could be with respect to the various methods of analyzing the growth. That is either in the context of longitudinal method, cross-sectional method, mixed method. We always have a question on growth and development. In case if they are missing upon that, then we have a question with respect to factors of growth. That could be one area which they are asking. This year highly anticipated is somatotyping. We are having a pending area from the somatotyping because last we had was in somewhere in 2018 or 19. Now it's pending. So somatotyping could be one probable question this year. So that is their 10th chapter. Now here again you see your 11.1 and 11.2 alternating. Right? Along with this I would also keep 9.8 where I talk about epidemiological anthropology, which is alternating. But the beauty of 9.8, whenever they ask you from the understanding of epidemiological transition. That is those three phases which was given by Umran, the age of pestilence, the age of pandemic. When we look at those three areas and those three ages, always if you know those three stages of transition, you will be able to answer a question from that. For example, last year we had a question on lifestyle diseases. When we see that question on lifestyle diseases, that is categorically talking about the second and the third stage of epidemiological transition concept of Umran. and you're able to understand that, you're able to give a good answer there. Now once you see 11.1, 11.2, 9.8 alternating, one mandatory area is 12th chapter. Every year applications, इसमें भी very favorite area is what? Forensic. Forensic. अब उसमें applications of forensic, applications of biotechnology, applications of genetic engineering, जो भी हो, forensic is there in the paper always for some reason, right? So now what is happening, my dear? In its totality, my paper 1 is over. My paper 1 is over. You could never imagine even in your dream that I would finish paper 1 so fast. Why? Because you were thinking that it's an elaborate process. Now when I am going to identify these topics, what am I going to do on each topic? I will specify that. When I say individual theme, what am I going to do on this theme? The first thing that I would do on each of this theme is, I would give you the basic. When I say basic, I have given you a handout. Yes, you have your handouts. I have given your handout. Every theme will have a handout like this which is going to be given, right? And if I have to display it to the people who are online, this is how the handout is going to look like, right? Now that is where, if you observe, I would have told you 1 pager. When I say 1 pager, whole of the theme in 1 page. I'm not going to have anything more. Now in this, when I'm looking at this, the basic aspect is what? Who are the thinkers? Now here I'm talking about whom? Structuralism, right? Now the basic aspect is what? Who are the thinkers associated with structuralism? Now the basic aspect is Emile Durkheim, organismic approach, Levi-Strauss, the binary opposition, deep structure, surface structure, Mary Douglas, purity pollution. Same Louis Dumas will use it in the understanding of caste, in the conservative approach of understanding of caste in Homo hierarchicus, and then Edmund Leach, which talks about theory of oscillating equilibrium. This is basic. And when I am going to do this basic aspects, along with this basic, what am I going to do? I am going to give structure for each of this theme. Now when I say structure for each of this theme, let me explain. If I am writing an answer on chromosomal abnormalities per se, if I am talking about numerical abnormalities in specific, or if I am talking about the allosomal abnormalities in specific, I am not talking about either monosomy or trisomy or nullisomy, but I am categorically talking about the allosomal abnormalities. Now when I am saying this, chromosomal abnormality, most of us will have what? Will have one picture which will look very weird, right? I don't understand why people are writing that, drawing that. Now they would draw some face like this and something like this, and they would indicate the characteristic features, right? I don't see any appealing mechanism there. What is the beautiful part of chromosomal abnormalities is, first, what is your introduction? Your introduction has to be, it is numerical. When it is numerical, what is the chromosomal number which is being affected first? That's my intro. When I write that intro, the second aspect has to be what? What is the nature of diagnosis that is done to understand that particular abnormality? Am I going for bar body analysis? Am I going for hormonal profiling? Am I going for karyotype analysis? Am I going for banding techniques, whether it is C banding, G banding, R banding, Q banding? Which kind of banding am I going? Diagnosis. Once I diagnose, I will have to understand what are the characteristic features of that particular abnormality. And once I write those characteristic features, the problem with characteristic features is we try to remember very peripheral things. But I will give you 6 to 7 points which are compulsory to be written. Compulsory. And those things will be done with respect to characteristic features. Once you understand those characteristic features, the immediate thing has to be inheritance chart. We are not doing this. In fact, if I see 100 copies which have written chromosomal abnormalities, 99 would not draw chromosomal abnormalities inheritance chart. Problem. I will have to show how this disorder is happening. Because when I look at chromosomal abnormalities, what is the basis? The basis is somewhere present in my cell division process. Either it is longitudinal splitting or either it is anaphase lagging that is existing. Now in that context, if I don't show those characteristic features and if I don't show inheritance chart, it's a problem. So draw that inheritance chart, simple inheritance chart. And last में prognosis. Prognosis in the sense what kind of treatment are we going to go for. And then specify what is the frequency of disease that is existing. Simple. It's easy. What is the frequency of the disease? Now, come what may, whether that person is asking me this question for 10 marker, 15 marker, 20 marker, I can beautifully represent. And I would conclude. What's my conclusion? My conclusion is chromosomal abnormalities are bad. Fantastically, they're bad. But that's not adding any value to my answer. I will have to interlink. When I'm talking about interlinkages, what kind of interlinkage will you see, my dear? I will have to look at the socio-cultural characteristic features and socio-cultural suggestions. You would have heard about rules of marriage. Yes, for this particular question, I can link rules of marriage with the process of something called as genetic counseling with an element of emphasis on eugenics. That means I showed the real application of 12th chapter in my answer. What is 12th chapter? Applications of Anthro. When I am writing applications of Anthro, I will have to show it to the examiner that these are applications. Genetic counseling application, eugenics application, and rules of marriage, because I can never separate the socio-cultural phenomena from physical and physical from socio-cultural. I cannot. If you still want to go a step ahead and talk about it, you can definitely bring in the status with respect to Indian tribes. I can also bring in a dimension with respect to 9.6 in this context, where I talk about genetic markers. Are you understanding? That means it is an art of interlinkage. For every theme, what am I doing? I am going to give you that structure. Along with that structure, what am I going to give you? I am going to give you the interlinkages. 90% of the candidates miss. 90% of the candidates miss. What interlinkages? For us, physical means physical. Bio. But why only bio? Why only bio? Don't you think examiner at multiple points of time is giving a clue that use socio-cultural and physical, use physical in socio-cultural, use Indian anthropology in socio-cultural, use Indian anthropology in physical. Interlinkage. I would teach you that interlinkage on that particular theme. And once I teach that interlinkage, the next part that is going to come is what? Value addition. Now value addition here, one simple value addition that I always follow is interlinkage. That is the biggest value addition that any anthro candidate can write. Another value addition is I would give you more of case studies. Now my approach is something called as minimalist approach. I don't bombard you with all case studies. What I would bombard you with? I would bombard you with 10-15 case studies which I can use it in multiple places. That is one thing that I would ensure. Why? Because it is practical, my dear. Because I was that side also. And the biggest problem that I could see in anthropology was interlinkages. But somehow I was able to decipher that. But another problem that I could see was I have a lot of case studies to be by heart. Now in fact, people release number of magazines on case studies. 100 case studies, will you be ever able to remember something there? No. So we would look at a minimalist approach where 10-15 case studies, but using it multiple places, and I will teach you that application. If I am having one case study, for suppose if I am talking about say John Kelly and Scott Kelly, the NASA's case study, And when I'm talking about NASA's case study on John Kelly and Scott Kelly, with respect to the twin studies and co-twin studies. Now, in twin studies and co-twin studies, we use this case study. Fantastic. I can even use this case study when I'm writing answers on theories of aging. Now, in theories of aging, you would have heard about something called as telomeric theory of aging. And in John Kelly and Scott Kelly, what do we observe? We observe that the length of the telomere is going to vary with a person who is existing in the space and who is existing on the ground. Although both are identical twins, both are having same genetic substance which is existing. Interlinkage. Interlinkage. That means I have some limited bunch where I can use it. That is one thing that you will have to understand, where I will teach you with respect to each of the theme that I am going to take. And each of the team, as I told you, will have a one-pager handout at any cost. One-pager handout at any cost for each theme. That means what? That is going to be my last day revision business. Because you know how the schema of the exam goes. That you write your GS, you're tired after GS 4. Now you'll have to sit down and pick up your optional for next 5 days. Then you'll have to write your language papers, and then you will write your optional. The challenge is, how much are you revising after language papers before optional? Now these one-pagers are going to be what? Your revision material. Before you enter the class, you get this one-pager. In the class, I would be adding certain dimensions to that one-pager. Now for example, I'll just take the example of that handout that I showed you. Now what is this main handout that is discussing about structuralism? And when you look at the structuralism, I told you key thinkers. Now one biggest problem for us when I'm writing thought or any thinker aspect is their names. I have that, I have the core idea. Then look at the main ideas of structuralism. Now what is whole structuralism saying? That whole of my structuralism is all about what? It is about the mental structures. And it is about the structure of the society. And it is also talking about what? Two important aspects. One is the surface structure and the deep structure. And it categorically says, that Levi-Strauss categorically says, I will have to use the statistical methods and mechanical methods for me to understand what? The deep structure going through the surface structure. That's all about structuralism. And one common idea that we see is the core deep structure of each of the society is very similar. Where we see a similar assumption of psychic unity of mankind, which has been taken by whom? Classical evolutionists. They were perceiving what the innovative potential of an individual is same. And that is where they said that is the psychic unity of mankind. Here what is the structuralism saying? The deep structure of any society will be very similar. Similar analogy, similar assumption. And for me to understand this, I will have to move through surface structure. And any mental structure is divided into binary opposites. That could be good, bad, evil, divine, pure, pollution, black, white, animal, human. అప్పుడప్పుడు మనలోని జంతువు బయటకు వస్తుంటాడు. Now then you will have to justify saying that that is nothing but the theory of binary opposition. But what is the criticism? The criticism that we see to this binary opposition is, it is talking about either at one extreme or the other. But when you look at Edmund Leach says it is never at the static. It is all about dynamic, where we see that it is theory of oscillating equilibrium. That where the society might be existing between two, it would oscillate and attain a position of equilibrium. And that is what he has seen when he was studying the political structure of Burma. Gumlao, Shan, Gumsa. Gumsa was the oscillating problem. And he was also saying that the traffic signal is a kind of oscillating equilibrium. The red, the green are the two extremes. What is the equilibrium position? Yellow is the equilibrium position. So that is what was told by Edmund Leach. Over. Now look at the main ideas. Universal structure, binary opposites, language, and it is all about what? Mental structure, and there is a pattern in my thought process. And what kind of field work, what kind of additions have been made to this? You look at Levi-Strauss. When you look at Levi-Strauss, the Bororo Society, and what is he talking here? What is he observing here? He observes two binary opposition of human and binary opposition with respect to animal. That means at some point we are here. At some point we are here. But Leach will say, we are a mixture of both. And are you able to link this to paper 2? Folk-urban continuum. Tribe-caste continuum. Tribe-Rajput continuum by Surjit Sinha. Now when you are talking about this folk-urban continuum, tribe-caste continuum, what is happening here? Folk is one extreme. Urban is one extreme. But are we having some obsolete societies? Are we having some discrete societies like this? No. All of the societies are oscillating in the middle. It is never binary opposition. It is in the middle. When we look at purity and pollution of the caste, and in the context of purity of pollution of the caste, what is happening, my dear? One extreme pure caste, one extreme polluted. But where is this backward classes coming from? Oscillating somewhere in the middle. So fundamentally what is happening? The element of structuralism linking to what? Paper 2, the tribe caste continuum, folk urban continuum, the heterogonal process, the orthogonal process that we would discuss. Great tradition and little tradition. Are we having objective and discrete great tradition and little tradition? No, we are oscillating. Suddenly DJ in Batukamma. What is this DJ in Batukamma? Batukamma is a little tradition. DJ is a great tradition. Are we oscillating? Yes, mixture. Are you understanding this dimension? So that is what we would be able to interlink here. And one aspect that we see is out of these books, when I am talking about the elementary structure of kinship, I would use this particular book when I am writing on kinship. When I am writing on kinship, what? Alliance theory. Alliance theory. Yes, because when you see two theories, alliance theory and descent theory, what is the basic difference of alliance and descent theory? In descent theory, they say bloodline is the primary, marriage is secondary. In alliance theory, what do they say? Marriage is primary. Marriage is the primary determinant for the kinship. Here in descent theory, they say, Mayor Fortas and R.C. Brown says what? That kinship, the bloodline is the determinant for the kinship. Right? So that is basic understanding. And Edmund Leach, with respect to the Burma society and what the political system of Highland Burma. So your book part is revised. But in the class, I would be telling you what is the detailed aspect of this case study, and you will be having a necessary space for you to fill that part. Then what kind of methodologies was undertaken? Right now, in the context of methodologies, you see my theme analysis. Now, because structural analysis of myth by Levi-Strauss is one very, very important contribution. That is what we have seen in the context of the structural analysis of myth. Last year also we had one question on Ash Boy myth. Right? Now what is this Oedipus myth? Now Oedipus myth is what? It is what? Son marrying the mother by killing the father without knowing the relation. Without knowing the relation, and once mother realizes this relation in this myth, mother goes for self-immolation. And when mother goes for self-immolation for such a kind of relation, the son goes and pokes his own eyes. That means what is happening? This is a myth which is showing a kind of incest. Is it showing a kind of incest? Yes. Are you understanding this dimension? Is it following some marital systems here? No. It is showing an element of incest. That is Oedipus myth. And what is the whole structure, what is the whole concept of Strauss with respect to myth? He says, the units of myth is my themes. The units of myth is my themes. And arrangement and rearrangement of these my themes is what is making sense of my myth. Your serial is a myth. Don't you think so? In serial, what happens? In movies, what happens? In movies, what happens? Hero entry, heroine entry, villain entry. Yes. Then villain chasing heroine, hero chasing villain, hero heroine meeting, Shubham card. Yes. Arrangement of this. Now, don't you think if I rearrange this, that is what is my Bahubali? Prabhas, Rana, yes, Ballala Deva, chasing the heroine. And what happens? Now what happens? It's the same my theme. The my theme here is what? Hero, heroine, villain, villain chasing heroine, hero chasing villain, and finally hero, heroine meeting, and there is an happy ending. All of my aspects of myth is what? Arrangement and rearrangement of my themes. And in the context of Oedipus myth also, it is what? All these are my themes. The boy, the son, my theme. Father, my theme. Killing of the father, my theme. Mother, then automatically what is happening? Son marrying the mother. Mother getting to know that this is own son, and finally going for self-immolation, and son destroying himself. My themes, arrangement and rearrangement. And when I keep oscillating, that is where I see the concept of oscillating equilibrium with respect to Edmund Leach. Right? So that is what you see in the context of case studies with respect to methodology, Oedipus myth, Ash Boy. This is what your handout will look like. I would be giving you all the dimensions, expanding, and you can happily write here. I would ensure that space is given for each of you to fill that part. And in the context of Kachin, that's what? Gumsa, Gumlao, Shan, the political theory. And now here, relevance in anthropology, right? What all other dimensions were discussed. And then the criticism of the structuralism. Criticism of the structuralism. Now here you have to understand, criticism of one theory becomes an introduction for another theory. That is what I will teach you as part of interlinkages. And last part is very, very important, that I would say, other contributions. That means, we have seen structuralism from the side of 6th chapter. But the same structuralism could be applied to 3rd chapter of paper 2. I can? Yes. The same structuralism could be applied to 7th chapter of paper 1 in the context of structure of language. When I see branches of linguistic anthropology have structural linguistics. Yes, structural linguistics. That's a branch where I see structuralism being used there. So I can talk about the 7th chapter. Then apart from that, I can also use it in the kinship chapter, that is 2.5. I can also use it there. Apart from that, I can use it in my 2.2 with respect to what? Structural approach towards social stratification. I know there are different approaches towards social stratification, which has been given by Marx, which has been given by Weber, which has been given with respect to symbolic interactionism. And one of those approaches with respect to this is what? The structural approach. So this is how your handout will be, and this is how I would expand on each of these dimensions. For each theme, I would have those handouts which are given. This is the dimension that I am going to cover with respect to each theme. Now when it comes to paper 2, because you might say, sir, you told about paper 1 but you didn't tell anything about paper 2. Now when you see paper 2, when you are writing paper 2, it's a different art, that I would say, completely. Why? Because when I say it is a different art completely, the problem when I am writing paper 2 is most of us bring in general studies. Yes. Now one random approach that I have seen from the side of the candidates in paper 1 also, they say they are writing a beautiful answer Fantastic. I don't know which constitution on the earth made this particular rule. I am not very sure. They write the answer. Last May, case study. Why do you want to use the word case study? What is the case that you are studying? Did you study any case? Or are you writing an answer? Writing an answer. Now when I am writing an answer, don't you think I would have put a heading saying that anthropological relevance? I could have. Anthropological contributions. Anthropological applications. Anthropological observation, because are we writing general studies or are we writing anthropology? Anthropology. Make the examiner feel when he is reading your paper, he is reading anthropology. Everywhere, wherever possible. If you can write your name also, write AXYZ. Scope lekapayina scope teesko. I will have to do it. I will have to do it. I don't know who told contemporary relevance. Now don't you think you are fundamentally scolding anthropology by writing contemporary relevance as heading? Shall I prove that? How are you demeaning your subject by writing contemporary relevance? That means you are indirectly telling to the examiner that subject didn't have any contemporary relevance. I am the messiah of this and I am bringing in the contemporary relevance. You please take it. Don't you think will we ever study any subject which is not having contemporary relevance, at least in the context of UPSC? Impossible. So don't demean the subject of anthropology by writing this subheading called as contemporary relevance. Anthropological relevance लिख लो यार. फिर भी ज़्यादा लिखना है ना. इसमें तो 4 branches है या 4 branches. Either talk it linguistic anthropological relevance, physical anthropological relevance, medical anthropological relevance, developmental anthropological relevance, urban anthropological relevance, architectural anthropological relevance. लिखना है, लिख लो. Why do you want to write contemporary relevance? You say undersea archaeology. That is one case study that I would give you. When I am talking about undersea archaeology, underwater archaeology, now in underwater archaeology you cannot randomly come and say contemporary relevance. My dear, that's a different branch which has been extending in the recent past with respect to archaeological anthropology. And any subject, any idea, any research, any fieldwork will fundamentally do what? Give an extension to the understanding of the subject. So never write this contemporary relevance. That's what I told you. I don't know which constitution on this earth has written that you should write contemporary relevance in anthropology, because I have seen most of the people writing. Sir, will it make a difference? It will absolutely make a difference. It will absolutely make a difference. Sir, did it make difference when you are writing your answers? Yes, it made. I will not say because of that only I had 15-20 marks jump. No, I will not say. But will it change the perception of the examiner? Obviously, yes. That shows your grip and depth over the subject. Now, when I am talking about paper 2, just like mapping the same important dimensions of paper 2, definitely I would have question from 1.1 and 1.2 archaeology. That's an area where I would inevitably have some questions coming in my exam. Sometimes examiner is very adamant about asking this concept called as ethnoarchaeology. You believe it or not, from 2016 till 2022, almost 4 years we had ethnoarchaeology. Principles of ethnoarchaeology, examples of ethnoarchaeology. Last 2 years examiner has taken a break. Iska matlab, the comeback will be strong. वो तो पक्का है. So ethnoarchaeology is one area again. Demography, sometimes it is asked, sometimes it is skipped. Right? I am not very sure about this particular question. But in this One area which could be asked is racial classification, and where examiner never skips is linguistic classification. He would never skip. मान के चलो linguistic classification रट्टा मार लो. He is going to ask you one branch of linguistic classification. Fix. Sino-Tibetan, Austrian languages, Munda languages. कुछ भी यार, एक क्वेश्चन, एक 10 मार्कर पक्का from linguistic classification. You can never skip it. Don't skip it also. You skip it, you will regret in the exam. Definite question from 3.1, the philosophical systems. The beauty of this chapter is, I will give you one small diagram. Not that same old diagram. Brahmacharya, Gruhastu, you will draw this, some every paper I see this diagram only. Is our life ascending like this? Like the arrows ascending? Every paper I see the same diagram, not this. I would give you one diagram with respect to understanding of karma, rina, and the interlinkages of the Purushartha and Ashrama dharmas. One small diagram, things are done. I would give you three thinkers with respect to 3.1. One thinker definitely that we would mention is Panduranga. Panduranga definitely is one thinker we would mention in 3.1. There are other two thinkers which I will give you. 3.1, one area. Then, caste studies is one area which is questioned. Now, caste studies, I would not deal it with respect to the syllabus. How I would deal it is, caste studies, I would deal with respect to the conservative approach. That is where I see the book view of caste. Then, the field view of caste and the contemporary view of caste. I would deal in these three dimensions. हमारे पास क्या होगा इसमें? In this, in conservative book view, we would have Louis Dumo, Homo hierarchicus, where there is a rigid separation that is existing with respect to the religious purity and the social purity and the social position. And this approach is what? It is showing an element of rigidity. I don't find any mobility, only rigidity. In the context of field view, what I would see an element of mobility which is seen to be existing, especially could be caste mobility, could be societal mobility, could be religious purity, some elements where I would see M.N. Srinivas coming into the picture. And I would have two more thinkers under field view. Book view, one. In fact, I can also have G.S. Gure under book view only. G.S. Gure, the 6 characteristic features of caste that is given by G.S. Gure, I would have only conservative. Field view, I would have 3. In contemporary view, I would divide the contemporary view of caste into 3 again. 1, the confrontational view. That means those who are opposing the caste system. 2, those who are accepting the caste system. And those who are seeking reforms in the caste system. Where I would bring in Surendra Jodka's understanding of caste. Where I would bring in Mark Junkter's understanding of caste. Michael Mofessel. I would have over 19 case studies which are given just for caste studies. 19 case studies. You can use all of these 19 case studies in any question of caste that comes. Because caste, when you observe the question, it is very analytical. I am not going to have a direct question. If I am having a direct question from caste, the only direct question is what theories of origin of caste. That's it. But otherwise it is all dynamic. Where I would give you 19 case studies. 19 case studies for each perspective, and you would automatically write any answer beautifully. For example, you would have this understanding of forward backwards and backward forwards. That is where we see that becomes the basis for demand of reservation of whom? These OBCs. For example, Marathas, Patidars, Jats, right, Kapus in Andhra Pradesh. That is fundamentally on the context of backward forwards and forward backwards. I would give you those case studies. Right? So once you understand that, then I would deal with what? Village studies. Again, you will always have a question on village studies. In the context of village studies, I would divide the village studies into two. One particular aspect of village study that I would be telling is what? The self-sufficient model. The self-sufficient model, under that I would discuss again 3-4 case studies. And the other model is interdependent model. One is self-sufficient model. The other one is interdependent model. And the third dimension that I would definitely add for this year's examination is what is the understanding of modern village. What is the understanding of modern village? Now you would have heard about the concept of Pura, provision of urban amenities in rural areas. Don't you think that is what is giving me an understanding of modern village today? Yes, I see integration of digital systems into village operations. Yes. Now when you look at PDS system, when you look at rationing system, what's happening? Are we having digital infrastructure which is integrated? Definitely yes. We would look at the anthropological perspective of modern village. With that I would finish one section. Right? Now here you might get a doubt with respect to, sir, what about 4th chapter? 4th chapter, again we would go for minimalist approach. What is that minimalist approach in 4th chapter? We would only see G.S. Gure, N.K. Bose, Iravati Karve, right? Ayyanapalli Ayyappan. For some reason it is important this year, right? Then we would look at S.C. Dubey, S.C. Roy. And maybe we would be ready with some crisis management with respect to women anthropologists and the contributions. Because that's been a long pending question from the side of UPSC. If they want to go for a gender balance in the paper, probably they could go for standalone question on women anthropologists. We will have to be ready with 4-5. Right? In fact, when you look at theories of intersectionality which has been given with respect to gender and caste, Veena Das, Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, Uma Chakravarti, Iravati Karve, all these people, Leela Dubey, all these people are what? They have given a lot of intersectionality with respect to gender and caste. That itself will give you a beautiful answer there. Because all that I will have to do is what? Write 5-6 anthropologists who are women anthropologists. So that could be one approach that we would follow. Now coming to the tribal part, that is from the 6th chapter. I can never have a question paper without 6.2. That is problems in tribes. Right? The issues that are faced by the tribal population, I can never have a paper without 6.2 and 6.3 at any cost. I can never have a paper without the concept of ethnicity. Frederick Barth's understanding. Clifford Geertz' understanding, the primordial approach, the instrumentalist approach. Right? You would see different kinds of ethnicity, different approaches to ethnicity. And as a linkage to this, you would always have various movements which are existing. That could be caste movements. That could be tribal movements. Right? That could be peasant movements. But peasant movements is less of ethnicity. Caste and tribe definitely more of ethnicity. Definitely an extension is seen to be existing. And in movements also northeastern India and central India. Northeastern India and central India, we always see movements coming from there. Then you could never have a question without, or the paper without, either regionalism or communalism. And you could never see a question paper without the role of anthropology in tribal development or rural development. You can never see a question paper without the role of anthropology in tribal development and rural development. And another area is the British administration with respect to the tribal population. Now when you look at your Zaza report, it talks about tribe as a colonial construct. Tribe as a colonial construct. And you look at the forest administration with respect to tribes. Or you look at the three different approaches to the development of tribes. One could be with respect to what? The isolationist approach. Then assimilationist approach. Then integrationist approach. That is where we see the national park approach which is seen to be existing, and the culmination of all these three approaches could be done with respect to whom? The tribal Panchashil. The tribal Panchashil and the draft national tribal policy which is existing. And definitely one question with respect to schemes of tribes. Janman is in the news. PVTG is in the news. DNT, de-notified tribes, in the news. So that means what? Your paper 2 is done? Yes. Now we will also have to be ready for some paper 2 like last year's paper. We were ready, but we will have to be more ready. Now for example, you see they were talking about religious fundamentalism. Yes. But here you have to understand religious fundamentalism is all about what? The chapter of religion that you study where? In 5th chapter. They were talking about impact of climate change on tribes. You should talk about what? You should talk about the socio-cultural impact. Then we would see, I would teach you something called as the crisis management templates. These are over 12 templates that I will teach you for crisis management. इसका मतलब जो भी क्वेश्चन आए, कुछ भी, right? We don't know what to write. We will keep some template and you can write. Right? So this could be the approach with respect to paper 2. Right? These are the topics. It's very simple. That is why I told you I am going to revise all of this in your revision classes. And once we finish these dimensions with respect to each topic, what's going to happen is, specifically, last 10 minutes I would end the session. You would have your tests. After doing so much circus, you need to test yourself somewhere. Because people will be fantastic till this point. But when I say test, sir, fever, sir. Not feeling well, sir. Test. Who is going to set the question paper? Question paper is going to be set by me. Right? Who is going to give you the explanation class? It's me. Who is going to evaluate your answer paper? It's me. Right? No outsourcing business. I believe in doing my own work. Right? Even if it is taking some extra time, I would do that. Question paper I would give. No test series team. No. One team. Right? Question paper I would give. And it is my general habit that I keep guessing questions. And I have been fortunate enough till now that at least 14 to 19 questions out of 28 questions in paper 1 and paper 2 constantly I have been hitting for last 5 years. Right? For those who are writing in 25, your papers would be accordingly, which I am guessing with respect to 25. For 26, we will see. Right? That has, I would say I have been fortunate enough. That could be purely because of experience that I am having with the examination. Right? Explanation class you would have on the test. In this explanation, I would not be focusing much on the content. My major focus would be on structure, crisis management, value addition. That could be my major focus. That means the skeletal approaches of the answer. Because anyway, content would be taken care in the class, some dictation as well as the handouts. Evaluation I would take care. And in evaluation, I would not be giving you any marks. It is my habit. I would only be focusing on what? Improvements. I will have a sheet which is having some evaluation parameters. I would only see on what scale are you performing with respect to this. Because if some people will come to me, sir, put marks, no. They would put me into an obligation, you will have to put 5 out of 10, however is the answer. Right, now when I am going to put some mark, they would look at me, sir. Then 3 will become 5, poor above. Right, so generally we would look at improvement aspect. Right, my major focus would be on SWOT analysis. Everybody would have strength, some weaknesses, some opportunities when you look at the question. I would look at those dimensions to a larger extent, right? Now, this is all what am I going to do with respect to the revision sessions and the test. Now, one small doubt that many people would have is, what is the difference between SRM 2025 and Mission Mains 2026? This will have revision classes, this will have revision classes. This will have handouts, this will have handouts, right? This will have tests, this will have tests. But the point is, these tests are completely oriented towards what? 2025 mains. And these people would majorly be writing more of micro and full length tests. I would not have much of sectionals here. I would majorly have micro because I want to look at progress and I want to keep you engaged. Because what happens is, when you're preparing for mains, if I'm idle, I would be lost. I don't want to keep you idle. We would have these aspects which are written on micro as well as full length. When it comes to these, majorly these people would have sectional and full length. And what is the major focus? 2026. The major focus is 2026. This would get over by August. This would go on till November. That means their test schedule will be distributed. Those people who are engaging for Mission Mains 2026 will not be as busy as these people. These people will have a very tight schedule till August. These people will have a schedule which is distributed and they would have more number of tests because they have lot of time to write. But here, limited tests. Limited does not mean insufficient. Limited means with the context of time that will be taken care here. And both of you will anyway have your PYQ discussions which are existing. And both of you will anyway have mentorship, right? I don't want to specifically tell because whatever is happening here, it is one-on-one, right? Exam, one-on-one, evaluation, one-on-one, classes, one-on-one, doubt clearing, one-on-one. Whatever problem you have, not problem with respect to subject. Don't come to me with family problems and all. I already have many, right? So you come to me with respect to the subject, we would discuss, I would disperse you with respect to those doubts. Is this clear? Yes. You have any questions, 5 minutes, you can ask and I would be more than happy to answer. Online, if you have some questions, you please type them in the chat box and I'm more than happy to answer. With respect to handouts, those who are coming offline will have physical copies of handouts. Those who are online will have soft copies of handouts, right? So that is one dimension. Okay. Any other? Class timings I would update very soon. Class timings I would update very soon, right? Either it would be between 11 to 1 in the morning or 6 to 8 in the evening. Any of these two time slots, I would finalize the time and tell you, right? So that will be there. Okay. Any other question? ठीक है, you can, my dear. You can do that, right? Now, student enrolling in online mode and writing offline mode, ठीक है. But I will only have to be little skeptical that when they say online mode, it is not one person who is watching it. I know many people will be watching it. It's okay, right? I can understand. ठीक है, you can do that, right? Any other questions you have? You have that flexibility, don't worry, right? Like HR, can it be early morning? That was very helpful, right? Early morning, I can have it, I have no problem, but many people might not come down. That's the issue, right? How much prayer preparedness is required for Mission Mains 2026? Now let me be very clear, my dear. If you think that you can replace your foundation course with this is not the place. I'm very clear on that because I would not cover those dimensions which are covered in foundation course. No. Foundation course I go from scratch. Right? Because some people will think that I will skip foundation course, take this, somehow it is on a lesser price note, I would continue. You cannot replace foundation course because foundation course would take around 4 months, 4.5 months. Now this I would be finishing in 25 sessions, so you should be understanding the length of that. And if you have finished your basic foundation, or if you have not done your foundation, and if you're doing your basic notes that you prepared by looking at online videos, that should also be fine, right? Basic preparedness for this course could be with respect to, if I'm saying nature, man, spirit complex, you should not say M.N. Srinivas. That's it, right? If you know who has given nature, man, spirit complex, sufficient. If you know that nature, man, spirit complex is all about integration of nature, man and spirit, sufficient, rest I will take care, right? How to prepare on our own because of financial constraint, right? I understand. I think keeping that in mind only, have already given the important topics, because some people might want to take it, some people might not or cannot afford. I understand that. That's completely understandable. That is why I have given the topic list. I could have restricted this topic list also, but I didn't want to do that because for me candidate is more important, right? So by picking up these topics, maybe you can revise, my dear. I think that could be a smart approach if you have listened to the session, right? If you have listened to Rakesh, if you have listened to the session, you can definitely do that, right? Any other? Schedule I would give you in a day or two max, because I'm just figuring out which to start with. Mostly I would start with physical anthropology because I want to finish that impact first, and then I would go to thought, then I would come to other aspects. And you know that from tomorrow onwards we are having anthropological thought free sessions for 4 days at Ashok Nagar, right? You can definitely attend. In those I will be giving all of these handouts. Anthropological thought handouts will be given for next 3-4 days. That I've kept that as free sessions. If you can tell your friends, they can definitely benefit, right? Because I didn't want to waste your time. So you can definitely see that. So that's it from my side, my dear.